Dr. Kira Thorne's hands trembled as she stared at the forbidden sensor array's display. The numbers couldn't be right. They couldn't be. "System diagnostic complete," announced her research assistant, Marcus Chen, from across the cramped laboratory hidden beneath the University of New Terra. "All sensors functioning within normal parameters." Kira's breath caught in her throat. If the sensors were working correctly, then the impossible was happening 3 levels above them, where the faithful gathered in the Cathedral of Eternal Light to witness Sigmar's blessing. Every 1,000 years, the star Sigmar blinked. For 3 millennia, this celestial event had defined the spiritual calendar of the Terran Federation. The Church of Sigmar taught that each blink was a divine acknowledgement, a moment when their patron star, visible even during daylight as a brilliant blue giant in the constellation Apex, dimmed for exactly 17 minutes and 33 seconds before returning to its eternal radiance. But this time was different. This time it was 200 years early. "Dr. Thorne," Marcus approached cautiously, noting her pale complexion. "The readings. I see them." Kira's voice was barely a whisper. She gestured at the cascade of data flowing across her screens. "Gravitational anomalies, exotic particle emissions, and," she paused, hardly believing what she was about to say, "wormhole energy signatures." Marcus leaned over her shoulder, his brown eyes widening as he processed the information. As one of the few graduate students willing to risk their career by working on forbidden astronomical research, he understood the implications immediately. "The Church banned deep space sensors after the heretical observations of 2847, he said slowly. "They said monitoring Sigmar's blink too closely was an affront to divine mystery. And now we know why." Kira stood abruptly, her chair rolling back across the polished metal floor. "Because they didn't want anyone to discover what we're looking at right now." The laboratory fell silent except for the gentle hum of their hidden equipment. 3 levels above, 10,000 worshippers were probably prostrating themselves before the altar, giving thanks for Sigmar's unexpected blessing. High Cleric Bartholomew would be declaring it a sign of coming prosperity, perhaps even divine favor for the Federation's expansion into the Outer Rim territories. None of them knew that Sigmar hadn't blinked at all. Something else had passed in front of it. "Dr. Thorne," Marcus said, his voice tight with concern, "look at this." He pointed to a secondary display showing long-range sensor data from the direction of Sigmar. A massive object, easily the size of a small moon, was moving across the star's face. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. The object was artificial. Kira magnified the image, her heart pounding as geometric structures resolved on the screen. Angular surfaces that caught and reflected Sigmar's light in patterns too regular to be natural. And at the object's center, a massive ring-like structure was beginning to glow with its own internal illumination. "It's a gate," she breathed. "A jump gate, but unlike anything in our databases." The implications hit her like a physical blow. Humanity had only developed jump gate technology 3 centuries ago, enabling faster-than-light travel by creating temporary wormhole connections between fixed points in space. But the gates they built were relatively small, capable of handling single ships or small fleets at most. This thing could accommodate an entire armada. "I'm detecting energy buildup," Marcus reported, his fingers dancing across his console. "Whatever it is, it's preparing to activate." Kira made a decision that would change the course of human history. "Download everything to secure storage," she commanded. "Every sensor reading, every spectral analysis, every gravitational measurement. Then we're going to the surface. Dr. Thorne, if the Church discovers what we've been doing, Marcus." She turned to face him, her green eyes blazing with determination. "If I'm right about what we're seeing, the Church's displeasure will be the least of our concerns." The Academy of Sciences on New Terra had been built to impress, soaring spires of white marble reaching toward the heavens, with vast windows that offered spectacular views of the planet's twin moons. As the premier research institution of the Terran Federation, it housed some of humanity's brightest minds. though most of them were currently engaged in approved fields of study: agricultural optimization, colonial life support systems, and defensive technologies for the ongoing border skirmishes with the Centauri Republic. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the Academy's director of xenoarchaeology, was reviewing grant proposals in her office when Kira burst through the door without announcement. "Elena, we need to talk. Now, Doctor." Vasquez looked up from her holographic display, noting her colleague's disheveled appearance and the wild urgency in her eyes. Kira Thorne had always been intense. It was what made her such a brilliant astrophysicist. But this was different. "Kira, you look like you've seen a ghost." "I've seen something much worse." Kira activated her personal data pad and transmitted a file to Elena's system. "Look at this." "All of it?" Elena's expression shifted from concerned to fascinated to horrified as she absorbed the sensor data. As one of the Federation's leading experts on ancient alien civilizations, she recognized the implications immediately. "These readings," she said slowly, "they're from during today's blink." "It wasn't a blink, Elena. Something massive passed in front of Sigmar, something artificial." Kira began pacing, her nervous energy filling the spacious office. "And now it's activating what appears to be a jump gate larger than anything we've ever imagined." Elena studied the structural analysis data, her mind racing through decades of archaeological knowledge. "The geometric patterns. I've seen similar designs before." "Where?" "The Titan ruins on Kepler 442b, the crystalline formations we discovered in the Perseus sector, and the obsidian monuments on—" Elena paused, a chill running down her spine. "Kira, the archaeological evidence suggests a single ancient civilization that spanned multiple star systems. We called them the architects, but we always assumed they'd been extinct for millions of years." "What if they weren't extinct?" Kira asked quietly. "What if they just left?" Before Elena could respond, her office door chimed. "Come," she called out, quickly minimizing the sensor data. Professor James Morrison entered, his elderly frame supported by a walking cane carved from Andromeden ironwood. As the Academy's Dean of Historical Studies and an expert on pre-Federation civilizations, he commanded enormous respect throughout the academic community. "Elena, my dear, I couldn't help but notice some unusual commotion in the corridors." Several of our astronomy colleagues seemed quite excited about today's unexpected blessing. Kira and Elena exchanged glances. Morrison was known for his discretion and his healthy skepticism of church doctrine, but could they trust him with information this explosive? Elena made the decision for both of them. "James, you might want to sit down for this." 20 minutes later, Morrison was staring at the data with the same horrified fascination that had gripped his colleagues. His weathered hands shook slightly as he manipulated the holographic displays, examining the alien structure from every angle. "Remarkable," he murmured. "Absolutely remarkable and terrifying." He looked up at the two women. "You realize what this means?" "That we're not alone," Kira suggested. "No, my dear, we've never been alone." Morrison stood and walked to Elena's window, gazing up at the star-filled sky. "I've spent 40 years studying the fragments of history left behind by pre-human civilizations. The evidence has always suggested that someone, or something, once ruled vast portions of this galaxy." He turned back to them, his expression grave. "The question isn't whether we're alone. The question is whether they're coming home." The Church of Sigmar's central archives were located deep beneath the Cathedral of Eternal Light, in a labyrinth of climate-controlled chambers that housed 3 millennia of religious texts, astronomical observations, and what the clergy diplomatically termed contextual historical documents. Dr. Morrison had contacts everywhere, including within the church hierarchy itself. Father Augustine, a progressive cleric who secretly believed that faith and science could coexist, had agreed to provide them with access to the restricted sections, but only for 2 hours, and only if they swore to maintain absolute secrecy. "What exactly are we looking for?" Elena whispered as they descended a marble staircase lit by artificial candles. The archives were kept deliberately dim to preserve ancient documents, giving the entire complex an appropriately tomb-like atmosphere. "Anything that predates the official founding of the church," Morrison replied softly. "The Sigmar faith didn't appear in a vacuum. It was built on older traditions, older observations. If anyone recorded evidence of these architects, it would be here." Father Augustine met them at the entrance to Section 7, his young face troubled. "Professor Morrison, I want to emphasize how unprecedented this is. If the High Cleric discovers, Augustine, my boy, sometimes the pursuit of truth requires us to take calculated risks." Morrison placed a reassuring hand on the priest's shoulder. "What we're researching could have profound implications for the faith itself." The priest nodded reluctantly and activated his biometric scanner. "You have 90 minutes. After that, the automated security systems will register your presence, and I won't be able to explain it away." Section 7 was smaller than Alina had expected, just a circular chamber lined with hermetically sealed storage units. But the age of the documents housed here was immediately apparent. Some of the storage containers bore markings in languages that predated modern Standard Terran by centuries. "Here," Morrison called out, pulling up files on an ancient reading terminal. "The Valdris Codex, written by a pre-Federation astronomer named Cora Valdris in 2156, nearly 700 years ago." Kira and Alina gathered around the terminal as Morrison accessed the archived document. The text appeared in archaic English, requiring the computer to provide translation assistance for some of the more obsolete terminology. "Listen to this," Morrison read aloud. "In the year of our observation 2156, I have recorded the 7th occurrence of the great dimming of the blue star. Unlike the learned men of my time, I do not believe this to be a natural stellar phenomenon. Through careful measurement, I have determined that a massive object transits the star's face with mathematical precision every 1,000 years." Alina felt her pulse quicken. "Keep reading." "Furthermore, I have detected unusual energy emissions during each transit, waves that my instruments cannot fully analyze, but which appear to originate from beyond our solar system. I theorize that what we observe is not the star itself changing, but rather the passage of an artificial construct of enormous size." "Artificial construct," Kira breathed. She knew. 700 years ago, she knew. Morrison continued. "Most disturbing of all, I have discovered evidence in ancient Martian ruins suggesting that these transits have been occurring far longer than human civilization has existed. Carved stone tablets, which my colleague Dr. Reeves estimates to be at least 50,000 years old, depict the same stellar event with accompanying symbols that appear to represent visitation." The three scholars stood in stunned silence, absorbing the implications of what they'd just read. Finally, Alina spoke. "Are there more documents, other observers who made similar discoveries?" Morrison scrolled through the archive index. "Several. Dr. Mikhail Korodov in 2867 wrote extensively about recurring stellar anomalies before his research was declared heretical. Dr. Sarah Chen." "Wait," Kira pointed at the screen. "Sarah Chen, Marcus's great-great-grandmother." "It would appear so. Dr. Sarah Chen, senior astronomer at the Luna Observatory, disappeared in 2891 along with all her research notes. The official report stated that she suffered a mental breakdown, but," Morrison pulled up her file, "according to this, she was investigating what she called the return pattern." Alina scanned the document quickly. She calculated the exact timing of the next early transit. Her mathematics predicted it would occur exactly when it happened today. "Which means," Kira said slowly, "she knew something was coming back." The lights in Section 7 suddenly brightened, and an automated voice announced, "Archive access period concluding in 15 minutes. Please complete your research and exit in an orderly fashion." "We need copies of everything," Alina said urgently. Morrison was already downloading files to his personal storage device. "I'm acquiring everything related to stellar observations, archaeological findings, and anything that mentions recurring cosmic events. He paused, his face growing pale as he read something on the screen. "Dear God, what is it?" Kira demanded. "Sarah Chen's final entry. She didn't disappear because of a mental breakdown. She disappeared because she tried to warn people." Morrison's voice was barely audible. She wrote, "They are not returning as explorers or diplomats. The patterns in the ancient artifacts, the mathematical precision of their movements, the energy signatures I've detected, this is a military operation. Humanity must prepare for conquest." The archive lights dimmed back to their normal setting, but none of the three scholars noticed. They were too busy contemplating the terrifying possibility that Dr. Sarah Chen had been right, and that her warning had arrived 200 years too late. The University of New Terra's Crisis Response Center had been designed for natural disasters, solar flares, asteroid impacts, or colonial emergencies. It had never been intended to coordinate humanity's response to the return of an ancient galactic empire. But Dr. Elena Vasquez supposed there was a first time for everything. Within 6 hours of their discovery in the church archives, she had assembled what would later be called the Scholars' Council, the Federation's most qualified experts in xenoarchaeology, astrophysics, military history, and linguistics. 12 men and women who, under normal circumstances, would never have been in the same room together. "The situation is developing rapidly," Elena announced to the assembled group. "Dr. Thorne, please brief everyone on the current status." Kira activated the central holographic display, showing real-time sensor data from their hidden array. The massive alien construct was now clearly visible as it completed its transit across Sigmar's face, and the ring-like gate structure at its center was pulsing with increasing intensity. "Energy output has increased by 300% in the last 4 hours, she reported. "Our analysis suggests the gate will achieve full activation within the next 18 to 24 hours. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the Federation's leading expert on alien artifacts, leaned forward in her chair. "Dr. Vasquez, you mentioned archaeological evidence supporting this threat. Can you elaborate?" Elena gestured, and the display switched to show photographs and 3D scans from excavation sites across human space. "We've discovered remnants of what we call architect civilization on 17 different worlds. The technology is always the same: crystalline structures with integrated energy conduits, materials that our best laboratories can't replicate, and consistent geometric patterns." She highlighted several artifacts. "More importantly, we found what appear to be star maps. Until today, we assumed they were purely historical records. Now we believe they might be operational charts." Professor Morrison stood, his cane tapping against the polished floor. "I've spent the evening reviewing historical documents. The pattern is clear. Every 1,000 years something happens. Mass disappearances of advanced civilizations, unexplained technological stagnation, the collapse of interstellar trade networks. We always attributed these to natural cycles or political instability. But now you believe they were periodic culling operations," said Colonel Sarah Martinez, the only military representative on the council. "I believe," Morrison replied carefully, "that we are dealing with a civilization that views this galaxy as their property and occasionally returns to manage their holdings." Dr. Rajesh Patel, the council's linguistics expert, had been quietly analyzing xenographic inscriptions on his tablet. "I've made progress translating some of the symbols from the Kepler ruins. The recurring phrase appears to be dominion of the crystalline eternal. But there's another term that keeps appearing: silicate servants." "Servants?" Elena asked. "Or soldiers. The translation is ambiguous. But based on the context, these silicate servants appear to be the enforcers of architect authority." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Finally, Colonel Martinez spoke up. "What exactly are we dealing with in terms of military capability?" Kira manipulated the display to show detailed scans of the alien construct. The object transiting Sigmar is approximately 800 kilometers in diameter and appears to be constructed primarily of an unknown crystalline material. It's not a ship in any conventional sense. It's more like a mobile space station with integrated jump gate technology, capable of supporting how large a force, Martinez pressed. Potentially millions of individual units, depending on their size and resource requirements. Dr. Tanaka interrupted. But we don't know that they're hostile. Perhaps they're simply returning to former territory for peaceful purposes. Dr. Chen's research suggests otherwise, Morrison replied grimly. Every piece of historical evidence points to periodic conquests, not diplomatic missions. Elena called up another display showing the current status of human military forces. The Federation Navy maintains approximately 2,000 active starships, with our largest vessels being the Olympus-class battlecruisers. Our total colonial population across 97 worlds is just over 8 billion. Against an unknown number of opponents with technology that's potentially millions of years in advance of ours, Martinez concluded. Dr. Vasquez, I have to ask, do you believe there's any chance of successful resistance? Elena looked around the room at the assembled experts, the finest minds humanity had to offer, all grappling with the same terrible realization. I think, she said slowly, that our only chance lies in the fact that they've waited this long to return. There must be a reason. Maybe they're not as invulnerable as they appear. Maybe there's something they need from us. Or maybe, she paused, hardly daring to voice the thought, maybe they're fleeing from something even worse. Dr. Patel looked up from his translation work, his face pale. Dr. Vasquez, I think you should see this. I've decoded another phrase from the Kepler inscriptions. It says, when the light blinks false, the Maker shall reclaim what was lost, and the younger races shall feed the eternal crystalline. The silence that followed was broken only by the gentle hum of the holographic display and the growing realization that humanity's 3 millennia of expansion and progress might be about to come to a very abrupt end. Lieutenant Commander David Park was halfway through his 3rd cup of coffee when the proximity alarms began screaming throughout the Federation starship Endeavour. As the senior watch officer aboard humanity's most advanced deep space reconnaissance vessel, he had experienced his share of emergency situations, but the cascade of alerts flowing across his tactical display was unlike anything in his 12-year career. Report, he barked, rushing to the primary command station. Ensign Williams, barely 6 months out of the academy, was struggling to process the incoming data. Sir, massive energy surge detected in Sector 77 Alpha. Distance approximately 43 light-years. What kind of energy surge? Park demanded, pulling up the sensor readings on his personal display. Unknown configuration, sir. Power output is. Sir, it's reading as equivalent to a main sequence star. Park felt a chill run down his spine. The Endeavour was currently stationed at the edge of the Outer Rim territories, conducting routine surveys of uninhabited systems. There should be nothing in Sector 77 Alpha except empty space and a few scattered asteroids. Helm, set course for the energy source, maximum sustainable warp, he ordered. Communications, send a priority message to Fleet Command. Tell them we're investigating an anomalous energy signature that could represent a first contact situation. Aye, sir. The communications officer's fingers flew across his console. Message transmitted, but given our distance from the nearest relay station, it won't reach command for at least 6 hours. Understood. Science station, I want continuous sensor sweeps. If there's something out there, I want to know about it before we get too close. The Endeavour's warp drive engaged with its characteristic low thrumming, and the starfield on the main viewer shifted to the familiar streaked pattern of faster-than-light travel. Park settled into the command chair, his mind racing through possible explanations for what they might be encountering. First contact protocols were clear. Maintain distance, gather intelligence, and report back to command before taking any significant action. but the energy readings suggested something far beyond the technological capabilities of any known alien species. "Sir," called Lieutenant Torres from the science station, "I'm detecting additional energy sources. Multiple objects, all converging on the primary signature." How many objects? Difficult to determine at this range, but preliminary scans suggest hundreds, possibly thousands. Park's blood ran cold. A single unknown vessel might represent a peaceful exploration mission. Hundreds of ships suggested something very different. Time to intercept. At current speed, approximately 47 minutes, sir. Reduce to half impulse when we reach the system perimeter. I want us to approach cautiously. Park activated his command console and began reviewing first contact protocols, though he suspected that whatever they were about to encounter would be far outside the scope of Federation diplomatic guidelines. 30 minutes later, as the Endeavour dropped out of warp at the edge of the target system, the crew got their first clear look at what awaited them. "Jesus Christ," whispered Ensign Williams, speaking for everyone on the bridge. The main viewer showed a sight that would haunt Park's dreams for the rest of his life. A massive crystalline construct floating in the void, its surface reflecting the light of the distant stars in prismatic patterns that hurt to look at directly. But it wasn't the structure itself that filled him with terror. It was what was emerging from it. Ships. Thousands upon thousands of ships, each one geometrically perfect and gleaming with the same crystalline material as their carrier. They moved with impossible precision, forming complex three-dimensional formations that spoke of a military discipline refined over eons. "Science Station, analysis of the unknown vessels," Park ordered, struggling to keep his voice steady. "Sensors are having difficulty penetrating their hull material, sir. The crystalline composition appears to deflect most of our scanning attempts. However, based on visual observation, the smallest vessels appear to be approximately 200 meters in length, while the largest—" Torres paused, recalibrating her instruments. "Sir, some of the largest vessels are over 5 kilometers long. Any response to our presence?" "Negative, sir. They don't appear to have detected us, or they're choosing to ignore us." Park made a decision that would later be debated by military historians. "Communications. Broadcast a standard first contact greeting on all frequencies. Keep it simple. Identification, peaceful intentions, request for dialogue." The message went out across the electromagnetic spectrum in a dozen different languages and mathematical formats. For several long minutes there was no response. Then, suddenly, every ship in the alien fleet turned in unison to face the Endeavour. "Sir," Torres reported, her voice tight with fear, "they're scanning us. Energy beams of unknown configuration, but they're penetrating our shields like they're not even there." "Evasive maneuvers," Park ordered, but even as he spoke, he knew it was futile. The alien ships were already moving to surround them, their movements coordinated with inhuman precision. The communications console erupted with activity as an incoming transmission overwhelmed their receivers. The main viewer flickered and resolved into an image that would be seared into the memory of every human who saw it. The being that appeared on screen was vaguely humanoid, but composed entirely of translucent crystalline material that pulsed with internal light. Its features were angular and geometric, as if carved from living glass, and its eyes, if they could be called eyes, glowed with cold blue fire. When it spoke, its voice resonated with harmonics that seemed to bypass the ears entirely and speak directly to the brain. "Organic entities of system designation Terra Prime," the being intoned, "you have expanded beyond the boundaries established for your species. This transgression ends now." Park found his voice with considerable effort. "This is Lieutenant Commander David Park of the Federation starship Endeavour. We're explorers, not conquerors. We come in peace." The crystalline being's head tilted slightly, as if the concept of peace was foreign to it. "Peace is a luxury afforded to those who serve the Dominion. You have chosen expansion, therefore you have chosen conflict." "We didn't choose anything," Park protested. "We don't even know who you are." We are the silicate eternal. We are the servants of the crystalline dominion. We are the shepherds of organic life. The being's image flickered as data streams flowed across the transmission. Your species designation, human. Home system, Sol. Current expansion, 97 colonial worlds. Technological level, primitive but rapidly advancing. Threat assessment, moderate. Recommended action, culling. Park felt the blood drain from his face. Culling? Your species will be reduced to a sustainable population level and relocated to designated reservation worlds. Those who resist will be eliminated. Those who comply will be permitted to continue existing under Dominion supervision. And if we refuse to accept these terms, the crystalline being's expression, if it could be called an expression, remained unchanged. Refusal is not a recognized option. Compliance is mandatory. Resistance is futile. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the Endeavor's bridge in stunned silence. Park stared at the main viewer, which now showed the alien fleet beginning to move with purposeful intent toward human space. "Communications," he said quietly. "Get me a direct channel to Fleet Command. Emergency priority. Tell them," he paused, trying to find words for the impossible situation they were facing. "Tell them that humanity is at war." Admiral Sarah Chen Morrison, descendant of the disappeared astronomer Dr. Sarah Chen, an adopted daughter of Professor James Morrison, stood on the observation deck of the Federation flagship Excelsior, watching the largest gathering of human military forces in history. Ships from every corner of human space had answered the emergency recall. Sleek destroyers from the inner worlds, battle-scarred cruisers from the frontier territories, even the massive industrial vessels that normally serviced the mining colonies. It had been 72 hours since the Endeavor's first contact with the Silicate Eternal, and those 3 days had transformed human civilization from a peaceful confederation of exploring colonies into a species preparing for its survival. "Admiral," called Captain Elena Rodriguez, the Excelsior's commanding officer, "Admiral Davidson's fleet from the Perseus sector has just arrived. That brings our total strength to 1,847 vessels." Chen Morrison nodded, though she knew the numbers were meaningless against what they faced. The Endeavor's sensor logs, transmitted just before the ship was destroyed by a single precisely aimed energy beam, had revealed the scope of their opposition. Tens of thousands of crystalline warships, each one demonstrating technology that was centuries, possibly millennia, ahead of anything humanity possessed. "Any word from the diplomatic mission?" she asked. "The transport Harmony reached the Silicate fleet 6 hours ago," Rodriguez reported. "Preliminary communications suggest the aliens are willing to discuss terms, but—" she hesitated. "But their definition of acceptable terms appears to be unconditional surrender, followed by the relocation of 90% of the human population to designated worlds under permanent alien supervision." Chen Morrison closed her eyes briefly, thinking of her adoptive father's research into historical patterns of conquest and culling. Professor Morrison had been right. The Silicate Eternal viewed the galaxy as their property, and humanity as an infestation that had grown beyond acceptable limits. "Ma'am," interrupted Commander Torres, the fleet's senior intelligence officer, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Dr. Vasquez on New Terra." The observation deck's main display activated, showing the familiar face of the xenoarchaeologist who had first pieced together the truth about the architect civilization. "Admiral, I hope you're prepared for some potentially encouraging news," Elena began without preamble. "We've made significant progress in our analysis of architect ruins, particularly the installations on Kepler 442b and the crystalline formations in the Perseus sector." "Go ahead, Doctor. The Silicate Eternal aren't the original architects. They're servants, artificial constructs created by an organic species that ruled the galaxy millions of years ago. More importantly, they have limitations." Chen Morrison leaned forward. "What kind of limitations?" "They're bound by what we're calling Dominion protocols, hard-coded instructions that govern their behavior. They can't simply eliminate all organic life, because their core programming requires them to maintain certain populations for the architect's eventual return. But the architects have been gone for millions of years, Rodriguez pointed out. Exactly, which means the Silicate Eternal are operating under protocols designed for a galaxy that no longer exists. They're trying to manage a dynamic situation using static programming, and that gives us an opportunity. Commander Torres spoke up. What kind of opportunity? Elena's image split screen to show archaeological data. We've discovered what appears to be command override codes in several architect installations. If we can access one of their primary control nodes, we might be able to reprogram them, Chen Morrison finished. Doctor, please tell me you have a plan for reaching a control node. I do, but you're not going to like it. The primary control matrix for this region of the galaxy is located on a world called Aegis Prime, approximately 40 light-years from Earth. According to architect records, it's the administrative center for what they called Sector Designation Terran. Rodriguez was already calling up stellar charts. Admiral, that puts it right in the path of the Silicate Advance Fleet. Our long-range sensors show they're moving directly toward human space, with Aegis Prime as a way station. How heavily defended is this control center? Chen Morrison asked. Elena's expression grew troubled. Extremely. It's protected by what the architect records call guardian constructs, automated defense systems that have been maintaining themselves for millions of years. But that's not the worst part. What's the worst part? To access the command override, someone has to physically interface with the control matrix. It requires a direct neural connection, and based on our analysis of architect biotechnology. Elena paused. The process is fatal to non-architect physiology. The observation deck fell silent as the implications sank in. Their only hope of stopping the Silicate advance required a suicide mission to one of the most heavily defended installations in the galaxy. There is one more thing, Elena continued. We've detected massive energy buildups at 17 other architect installations across human space. We believe the Silicate Eternal are activating dormant systems, possibly preparing for large-scale terraforming operations. Terraforming for what? For the return of the architects themselves. Admiral, I think the Silicate Eternal aren't just culling human expansion. They're preparing the galaxy for the return of their creators. Chen Morrison turned to look out at the assembled human fleet, knowing that she was about to ask them to attempt the impossible. Behind her, Captain Rodriguez was already coordinating with the tactical planning staff, while Commander Torres began analyzing Aegis Prime's defensive capabilities. Dr. Vasquez, the Admiral said finally, will need detailed technical specifications for the control matrix interface. And Doctor, thank you. At least now we know what we're fighting for. Admiral, there's one more thing. Professor Morrison asked me to give you a message. Go ahead. He said to tell you that your great-great-grandmother Dr. Sarah Chen would be proud, and that this time humanity won't face the darkness alone.